Well, hello everyone. Welcome to another live stream on the History Vibe podcast. And today I'm joined by Kumar from Satya Vibes. The link to his channel will be in the description below and will also be in the pinned comment. And today we're talking about Yahweh in Hinduism, the common origins of Indra and the god Abraham. So Kumar, thank you for joining me today. And could you tell the audience a bit about yourself?
Hi, Jacob. Thanks for adding me to the channel today. Hi, this is Kumar. I did a master's degree in religion and master's in science. I'm hosting a channel called Satya Vibes, both in English and Telugu. So this is a channel to discuss about philosophy, religion, social sciences. It's dedicated to offer research-based perspectives and in-depth analysis. So what I'm trying to do is reach out to people and share the insights from comparative religion, philosophy, and how we see about social science and political issues. Yeah, that's how we are working with a bunch of people.
I also want to go ahead and announce to the audience that we are working on getting History Valley videos in Hindi for the YouTube channel called History Valley India. That's still in progress. I'll keep everybody up to date on how that goes. But in the meantime, let's get to the topic. So, the common origins of Indra and the god of Abraham. And so, what I'm talking about there has to do with the Indra. He was the supreme god. He's the supreme god of the Rig Veda. But the Indra today is not regarded. Hold on one second. Just gonna put my phone on silent real quick. And that's it. Okay, so Indra is the supreme god back in the Vedic era, the Rig Veda. The Rig Veda is a much older text than the Mahabharata. A lot of people try to say that the Bhagavad Gita is the Hindu Bible, but a lot of people don't really think about that, and realize actually the Bhagavad Gita is a chapter in the Mahabharata. I happen to have the entire Mahabharata in my library. It's a very large text. It's voluminous. It's many volumes. So it's not, you can't buy it in just one big book. You got to get it in volumes. At least I don't know about it being in one giant book yet. But anyway, the Rig Veda, on the other hand, is a much older text. I don't remember the dating of it off the top of my head. I think it's supposedly collected in the early first millennium BC. I could be misremembering that, but anyway, Indra is a storm god, and he overthrows his father, Dayu, the Dayupita, the Sky Father. Now, there's two versions of this story. There's one in which he overthrows Dayu. I just mentioned that. And then in another story, and this one's key, he overthrows Tavashtur instead. Or Tavashtar. So Tavashtar is overthrown by Indra. But it's what Tavashtar does to try to save himself from being overthrown is interesting. It's essential to this show. He creates a monster called Vitra to try to stop him. So Vitra and Indra fight, and Indra kills Vitra. He overcomes him, and then eventually he overthrows Tavashtar. So, from my point of view, it seems to me that Dayu and Tavashtar should be understood as two names of the same deity. They are both names of the Sky Father. But if you look in Anatolia, modern day Turkey, and I made this point when I did some shows with Derek on the origin of the biblical God. I pointed out that Anatolian myth is central to this whole thing, because at least it's a central element. Because the story of Tishub, which is a different version of Ishkur, overthrowing Kumar B. Kumar B is basically the same god as Enlil, usually at least. Kumar B creates a being called Ulukumi. And what he does by doing this, he goes about by doing this by impregnating a mountain. That's what he does. And Ulukumi rises from out of the mountain. And Ulukumi is set about to fight Teshub to try to stop him. This is very similar to what you see in Hindu text, where Tevishar creates Vitra to try to stop Indra. And they both fail. In both stories, they both fail to stop the storm god from overthrowing and overcoming the Sky Father. And so I think that Indra is based on Tishub, and Indra has been compared to Tishub before by scholars. And I think that comparison is sound. I think it's the same deity. But what does that mean for Dayu? Well, that would basically mean that Dayu, or Tevishar as he's also called, is basically Kumarbi, who is Enlil. This connects to the Greek mythology pretty well, because the Greeks, they have a story about Zeus and how he's going to be overthrown by a god. That would be that would come from Metis. When Zeus found out about this, because Metis is one of his many, many wives, Metis was swallowed by Zeus, paralleling Kronos and what he did or tried to do. And Metis is swallowed by Zeus. She goes in his skull. And what happens is that she gives birth to Athena. And she rises out of Zeus's skull. Now, you might be thinking, what the hell does this have to do with Ishkur and Indra? Well, if you read about Kumarbi, and when he tried to when he tried and successfully overthrew his father, Anu, he swallowed his father's manhood. He became pregnant. And what happened is that Tishub, that's Ishkur, rose out of Kumarbi's skull. Sound familiar? So the Greeks knew this story. This without question, they knew this story. And scholars have long understood that Hesiod's theogony, which is the basic story of Uranus, who we know now as Uranus, and Kronos as Zeus, as well, them overthrowing one after the other. They get that they get those stories from the Anatolian text, because they get the story from Anu being overthrown by Kumarbi, and then Kumarbi getting overthrown by Teshub. But we got to remember that Anu overthrew a god too, called Alalu. You see a problem. If you think about what I said, you see a problem. But I'll point it out. The Greeks omitted a stage there. In the Anatolian myths, you have 3 gods, one overthrowing the previous one. But in Greece, you only have 3. Uranus, Kronos, and Zeus. As opposed to the Anatolian, the Hittites, Alalu, Anu, Kumarbi, Teshub. So in Hittite myth, you have 4 stages. In Greece, you have 3 stages. Do you see my point? So they chucked one off the board there. They did this by making Zeus retain his position as Sky Father. Zeus's very name is based on the Sky Father. A different form of his name, Dios, but also in the Mycenaean language, Zeus's name was referred to as Dewey, or something to that effect. His very name is based on Diu, the European Sky Father. It was pronounced differently in various different European cultures. So here's what I surmise from what's going on here. This is my conclusion. The Greeks did not want to give up Zeus to a new god, to a new supreme god. So they created a story to get around it. They claim that no, actually Zeus thwarted the prophecy of his eventual downfall. It's never going to happen. He prevented it. He swallowed Metis, and instead Athena was the one that was born out of his skull, not a male god that would overthrow him later. So Zeus overcame it. He prevented it successfully. That's what the Greeks would have everyone believe. Whereas the source of the story, it was the opposite. No, he was not successful. He didn't stop anything. Teshub did overthrow him. So the Greeks created a story to get around it. I can't stand it when some scholars, actually a lot of them, compare Zeus to Ishtar. I'm like, no, you're missing the point. They created the story of Zeus swallowing Metis because they didn't want to worship Teshub as the supreme god in Greece, which means Zeus cannot be Teshub. It's impossible. He can't be him. That doesn't make any sense. So that means that Zeus is basically Kumar. But what's interesting is they try to make Zeus a little bit different purposefully. I'll give an example. So while he does give birth to Athena out of his skull, paralleling Teshub's birth in the Hittite stories, instead of Zeus being the one to swallow Kronos' manhood, Kronos is the one that swallows Uranus' manhood. So they take an element of Kumarbi and they shift it back to Anu, the god that they have adopted as Kronos in their religion. So they're definitely shuffling or reshuffling some of the details around. Again, their whole goal is to not give up the Sky Father Diu. I want to point something else out in case the audience didn't notice. Zeus's very name, being based on Diu, is linked to the Hindu god Diu. It's the same god, and Diu was overthrown by Indra. And that's where the connection starts to really kick in. It's the same story. Now, what does Yahweh come in? Let's get to the ball cycle. I had mentioned in previous episodes, in the ball cycle, Baal Hadad, another version of Ishtar, is the same god. Baal Hadad lays waste to the 70 sons of Afirat. Afirat was El's consort in the Canaanite religion. She was the queen of the gods down there. So he overthrows not just his father, okay, because that's obviously what's going on here. He slays the 70 sons of El and Afirat, for crying out loud. It's nothing less than a war he's waging against not just his father, but all of the gods that oppose him. So he lays waste to them. He laid waste to them until he's the last god, basically. And then the Hebrew Bible, Tanakh is like a sequel to the Baal cycle. The gods are dead. Yahweh's all that's left. And you'll see, if you read the Hebrew Bible, they make fun of the gods at being dead. Now, if they were dead, lifeless idols, right? Were they alive at some point in the past? What's God jealous of in the Ten Commandments? I'm a jealous God. Well, if they were always lifeless idols, that doesn't make sense. What the hell is there? What is there to be jealous about? You're the only God that ever existed. Oh, well, there are others. That's why in Deuteronomy 32, Yahweh inherits Israel from El, Ha-El Elyon in Hebrew, the Most High God. So he's inheriting from El. If you look at El, I mean, it's quite, to me, it's quite clear that it's just a shorter form of Imlau, an abridged form of his name. So when you piece it all together, Yahweh is based on the Canaanite god Baal Hadad. And by the way, that would mean that the authors of the Hebrew Bible be plugged in together, they would be plugged into the different forms of Baal Hadad across different cultures in the Middle East, Mesopotamia, and whatever, and nearby. And Yahweh is being constructed off of that God. I would say almost entirely. There might be a characteristic here or there derived from a different deity, but Yahweh is almost entirely based on Ishkar. I would say almost single-handedly based on Ishkar. Baal Hadad, Tisha, whatever you want to call him. It's the same God. Now, who is Ishkar in Greek mythology? Just to come back to the Greeks. Who is he down there? Does he even have a Greek version of himself? Well, I mentioned earlier that the Greeks wanted to override him by saying, oh, he's never going to exist in the Greek stories. Metis was stopped from giving birth to him. In a sense, that's the case. But in another sense, he is there. But he takes on a lesser form. Hera, the queen of the gods in ancient Greece, she seems to me just to be their version of Afirat. And in Judaism, she's called Asherah. Well, it's very strong resemblance to Hera. I don't think that's a coincidence. There's a lie that's being spread by some scholars out there, and this is where me being nice, it just goes off the cliff. That Yahweh and Baal Hadad were brothers. No, that's an outright fabrication. Let me be so bold as to say there is no evidence that Yahweh is Baal Hadad's brother. And that it is flat earth, fake moon landing hoax lie level of nonsense to say that Yahweh is the brother of Baal Hadad. There is absolutely no evidence of it. The inscriptions that are used to prove that barbaric theory has to do with vague references to Yah ben Il. Well, Yah is another version of Yam. Scholars like Niels Peter Lemke agree with me on this. It's so obvious. Yam is Yah. the Canaanite Yah, the so-called Canaanite Yah. This is not the biblical God. Somebody could just read the Hebrew Bible and look at the passages about Yahweh fighting the sea and easily debunk this nonsensical theory in 5 minutes. What is the Hebrew word? It actually sounds like yam, literally. He's fighting yam. That's the sea. Look it up. He's fighting yam. So the problem with the theory that Yahweh is Baal-Hadad's brother is that Yahweh in the Hebrew Bible is fighting Yah, son of El, who is Yam. Well, that really can't be him now, can it? Or he's fighting himself. That's ridiculous. Easily debunked. Another ridiculous thing that I hear is, well, Baal-Hadad can't be the God of the Bible because Baal was condemned as a false god. You have any idea how many different gods in Canaan were called Baal? A lot of them were called Baal. That's a common name, title, excuse me. It means Lord. Baalu means Lord. Take your pick. Baalu Haman, Baalu Berith. This is a couple different gods right there. There's a lot more than that. Baalu Hadad is the one I've been talking about this entire show right now. Is an example of that. There are several different ones. But I do think the biblical Baal is based on one of those different gods called Baal. You know, there's a Stargate episode. Stargate's a sci-fi science fiction TV show based which continues off the film Stargate back in the 1990s, but Stargate SG-1. They did a episode that's clearly a joke off of this. Several episodes about Baal, who's depicted as an alien in that series, as having cloned himself multiple times, and there was a joke about balls, and they laughed. The reason they did that is in a way it's to make fun of. That's at least one of the reasons. It was to make fun of the fact that the Canaanites had a motherload of gods called Baal. That's why they did that. Anyway, I think the biblical Baal is based on Baal-Hamon. Baal-Hamon was a major deity in Carthage. Carthage is located in North Africa. But Baal-Hamon's also featured in Tyre. Well, and a few other places. Baal-Hamon, let's just say the worship of Baal-Hamon was brutal. They took infants and sacrificed them brutally to Baal-Hamon. They would take them, they would put them into bulls, not real bulls, but the artificial bulls. They put the baby in there and they heat them up. And basically the baby gets cooked alive to this god. That's what the Hebrew Bible is talking about. It's talking about infant and child sacrifice to Moloch, or Moloch is another version of the same god. This is another biblical tale that's derived from Baal-Hamon worship. The Greeks and the Romans, especially the Romans, they were not kind They were both, like I would say, I believe they were both equally not kind to Baal Hammon worship, and rightfully so. They were criticizing it for the brutality and immorality that it was, and they even the Romans went as far as comparing him to Saturn. I don't remember the Greeks compared him to Kronos. They probably did. I just don't remember right now. The Romans compared Baal Hammon to Saturn because they recalled the stories of Saturn's trying to swallow his own children whom were infants at the time. But the Saturn, because he tried to do that, was compared to Baal Hammon because the Carthaginians sacrificed babies to Baal Hammon. Just give me 1 second. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. Yeah, so I think it's pretty clear. I think it's pretty clear that Baal Hammon is the basis for the biblical Baal. I tend to think that the Hebrew Bible, because I think the creation of it's much later. But the consensus places, I think it knew about these Greco-Roman polemics against Carthage, and was inspired. The authors of it were inspired to create this story, the story of Moloch and the story of the biblical Baal, the downfall of the prophets of Baal. I think it was based on the polemics against Baal Hammon. There's also another story. Like the parallels between Ishkar and the biblical God are enormous. One of the other ones is he went into a bog for like 7 years, and then he arose out of it. It's kind of like what you see in Genesis. God makes everything in 6 days. On the 7th day, he sleeps. People try to say, oh, the Sabbath parallels Saturn worship. I'm not so sure. I don't think it does. You have to remember, the Sabbath is not all of Saturday. It is part of Friday and part of Saturday. It starts on Friday. So it's not like, in other words, it's not just one day per se. Not completely. So it's like a quasi parallel, yes, but it's not perfect. Besides, the God of the Bible can't be Saturn anyway, because Saturn is overthrown a whole long time ago, generations ago. He is overthrown by Jupiter, the Roman version of Zeus, which is basically Enlil. So to me, the God of the Bible must logically be the latest one that isn't overthrown, which would be Ishkar. It just occurred to me I did not finish my point about which deity did Ishkar become in ancient Greece, since he did not become the son of Metis. Okay, so let me finish that point before I forget to once again. I think he's Ares, the Greek god of war. It's a very simple reason why I think that. Ares is the son of Zeus, one of the many sons of Zeus. It's his mother that I think gives us a clue here. Hera. Hera is his mother. That's key. It's a key fact. Who is Baal-Hadad's mother? Who is Ishkur's mother? Same god. Afirat is his mother, or Asurdu as she's called in the Hittite myth. Hittite stories. That's who she is. That's Hera, same goddess. You can even hear it. It's the same goddess. Just like Dayu and Diyu are the same god. Same kind of way. And Baal-Hadad, of course, is the undefeated, powerful storm god and war god. Now, there is never a war god in canon, Ashtar. Ashtar, primary territory is in Moab. You had this thing called the Mesha Stele, which chronicles a combat between Moab, the king of Moab, King Mesha. That's why it's called Mesha Stele, named after him. And he is fighting against the king of Israel and his army. He's begging his god, Ashtar Chemosh, to help him win the day. And Ashtar rains fire from the sky. And the Judean army flees. They were defeated. So Ashtar defeats Yahweh, his brother, in battle. Defeats him. And it's not the only time that Yahweh gets checked. Judges 1:19 is another instance of this. When God literally gets defeated by iron chariots. So, here's another thing. It's another thing that makes it even more interesting. Ishkur takes somebody to heaven. Yes, he did. Ehrman. He took him to heaven. Sound like somebody in Genesis again? God took Enoch or Hanok to heaven. That's right. Ishkur did that. According to those stories, at least. I could keep going. I could point out that Manfred Bitek, major Egyptologist. He excavated Avaris, by the way, famously. Manfred Bitek, I've had him on the show, points out that Ishkur was the chief god of the Hyksos. Now, come on, people. What more do y'all need? The Hyksos were people that invaded Egypt, for crying out loud, and they left. Like the Exodus. Josephus himself compared them to the Exodus story. I mean, my goodness. You had Ishkur overthrowing his father, killing all the other gods, taking somebody to heaven, chief god of the people going in and out of Egypt. How many more similarities does he need to the God of the Bible? How many? I want to come back to Aries just for a moment. The argument that Aries is Ishkur also is made by ruling out other deities that Aries could be based on. Some compare Aries to Nergal for understandable reasons. You could even argue that one of Nurgle's different forms, Era, even sounds a little like Ares. But here's my problem with this. Nurgle is a god of plagues. There's a lot to it about him being the god of plagues. It's quite clear to me that he becomes Apollo in the Greek myth. So he can't be Ares. Also, Nurgle breaks into the underworld and forces Ereshkigal, the underworld goddess, to marry him. Ereshkigal is the queen of the dead in the underworld, for those that don't know. That's a problem. He's actually a little similar to Hades there. The only difference is that I'm not saying he is Hades, but the difference is that she's already in the underworld. So he didn't take her, he didn't kidnap her and bring her there. Hades did that in the Greek myth. He kidnaps Persephone and forces her to live with him in the underworld. But in Sumerian myths, she's Ereshkigal there, which is the original version of Persephone. She's already there. She just gets forced to marry Nurgle. There's a lot more I can get into, but to save time, I will bring up one key piece of evidence, and then I'll move on. And this is a much more decisive piece of evidence. In the Elephantine Papyri, Yahweh has a wife. And no, let me stop you before you think it's Asherah, because of the famous Yahweh and his Asherah inscription. I'm not talking about that. In the Elephantine Papyri, Anat Yahu is Yahweh's wife. That's right. Totally different goddess. That's not a coincidence, because Baal-Hadad's wife was who? Anat. I don't know how anybody can get around that being clear, decisive evidence that Baal-Hadad and Yahweh are the same God. They have the same exact consort, but goddess of war. But they don't want to see it. Some want to see it. Some do. Some admit what's in front of them. But many will not. It's going to take time. But Anat, the goddess of war, is his wife. Well, Ares is married to a goddess of war, by the way. Enyo, called Bellana by the Romans. That's it. That right there. That's all I have to say. That's really all I have to say. Athena. She's been compared to Anat, but I actually don't think she is Anat. There's a reason why. Athena is different. Very loyal to Zeus. Admittedly, on one hand, she's imitating Ishtar. I get that. She's birthed out of Zeus's skull, like Ishtar is out of Enlil's skull in the Hittite stories. Let me give their Hittite names. So Tishub comes out of Kumarbi's skull. That's how the text will read. So just to make that clear. There is a goddess in the Sumerian text. A lot of people don't know about her. Ananitu. Ananitu is a goddess of war and virginity. She's Enlil's daughter. The mother's name isn't clear. At least not to my knowledge. But that's Athena. That's just Athena, full stop. Athena is based on her. That's where they're getting this story from. Anat, on the other hand, is described as a very vicious, violent goddess in the Canaanite stories. She's nothing like Athena. And quite frankly, I find it hilarious she's a virgin. That does not make that's like an oxymoron from all hell. She's not a virgin. Yet they call her that. Okay. I'm not denying that. They call her that, but it makes no sense. Because she's massively in love with Baal-Hadad. So it just contradicts itself. The whole narrative just collapses on that front. But what about the devil? Is there a god that rebels against Ishkur, try to stop him? Is there a god that tries to overthrow him after he sees his power? So I'm not saying Ishkur is the devil. Ishkur is a god of the Bible, so he can't be the devil. Yes, there is. I mentioned him earlier. Ulukumi, the stone giant, created by Kumar to stop him. And Ulukumi failed. In fact, there's a depiction where Ulukumi is depicted as a giant, wiggly serpent. And Sharuma, a son of Tishub, so making Sharuma Ishkur, one of Ishkur's children, he's depicted next to him in the relief, helping him fight Ulukumi. Just like Michael helps God fight the devil, fight Sataniel in the Enochic literature. And later in Revelation, because Revelation plagiarizes the books of Enoch. So, at least one or two of them is copying from. But anyway, when you look at Ulukumi, he's doing the same thing the devil does. And he gets defeated. In fact, the story is so similar. Because the Ulukumi is sitting on a being called Upaluri, because Upaluri is holding him up. He's very similar to Atlas in that respect. His foot gets cut off, causing Upaluri to fall down. So that way Ishkur can strike down Ulukumi and defeat him. Just like the devil fell from the sky like lightning, says in Revelation, like lightning. So I can't remember if that details in the Enochic literature or not, but he does fall. He does fall. It's actually a little similar to how Lucifer is described in Isaiah, or Hillel ben Shahar, as it calls him. He falls too. He tried to be like the Most High. Although I think Lucifer's story is a little bit more complicated. Well, no, not complicated. His origin is different. Perhaps. His name is curious. It means son of the dawn. Shahar is a Canaanite god. He's being called his son, which is curious. And it reminds me of Marduk. His name means son of the sun, literally. Mariutu, son of the sun. And you can read stories. Like, I don't think he's Ishkur. Just to be very clear to the audience, this can't be Ishkur. But there are stories where Marduk is imitating Ishkur, like in the Lamentation of Damkini. In the Lamentation of Damkini, Damkini or Damgonana talks about the story talks about Marduk having Enlil captured in battle. So Enlil is being overthrown. But Marduk, he was originally a sun god, a minor sun god. Much earlier in time. He didn't have all these stories. They're plagiarizing the stories of Ishkur and giving it to Marduk. It just happens that the Enuma Elish, which is the main story associated with Marduk, it's all about Marduk's triumph, means on high. So I take that to mean could it be the case that Lucifer is making himself like the Most High because Marduk was made to look like Ishtar, even though he's not him? And let's just be clear about something else. Nowhere in the Hebrew Bible does it even say Lucifer is Satan, regardless of if one thinks he's Lucifer or not. We have to admit this to be the case. Nowhere in the Hebrew Bible is the devil ever referred to as Lucifer. They're never explicitly identified as the same character. But long after the Bible was fully created in its final form, in its final canonical form, Christians later concluded that Lucifer and Satan are the same character. But this is a post-biblical interpretation being imposed on the Bible. Despite what I said, the fact that Lucifer is described as trying to overthrow the Most High, because that's what Isaiah is talking about, it seems to me that even though it's borrowing characteristics of Marduk, for sure, I have to say, based on the narrative of it, I still have to say it's Ulukumi. So I think the story of Lucifer and the story and the narrative of Satan, they're based on the same story, but they're different takes on it. So ironically, even though the Bible doesn't explicitly say they're the same, I actually agree. They're the same. It is the same character, technically. But I find it interesting that Isaiah's take on the rebel is borrowing attributes from Marduk. I've seen there are some channels on the internet trying to argue that the Bible's trying to tell the true story of what really happened, and the Enuma Elish is the perversion. I just think that's ridiculous. No, that couldn't be more wrong. Marduk is a false god, according to Jeremiah chapter 50. So he can't be the God of the Bible. But that's just the thing. Ishtar is never a false god in the entire Hebrew Bible. I've said this for years. I'll say it again. I've been saying for many years, nowhere in the Hebrew Bible is Ishtar a false god. And nowhere in the Hebrew Bible does it ever attack Anat, his wife, as a false goddess. It'll attack Asherah, his mother. It will not attack Anat anywhere. I challenge anybody. Find me a passage. Good luck. You won't find it. There is no passage in the entire Bible condemning Ishtar as a false god. Nowhere. You will not succeed in finding it. You will not succeed. You will not. There is no such passage. It does not exist. So, my point is, you can find a passage condemning Nergal. You can find one condemning Marduk. Baal-Hamon. Because they're calling him, he is the Baal of the Bible. Moloch, same god as him. You can find that stuff easily. You'll never, ever find Ishtar as a false god anywhere. I want to mention something else. This is something that's intrigued me for many years. In Acts, the book of Acts, even in Acts, you have a strange story where Paul, I don't believe this actually happened historically, but the fact that that Luke created such a story is intriguing to me. In Acts talks about Paul going to Areopagus. That means Ares Hill. He goes there and tells the Athenians, tells the Greeks to worship the true God. That's what he does. And Areopagus is where Ares was put on trial for a murder, I believe. So he goes there and tells them to worship the true God, but he does not explicitly condemn Ares. Find that interesting? Where is the next part of the verse? Worship the true God. Ares is false. He's an idol, lifeless. Not there. Well, why? So Paul doesn't have a problem with Ares? Or is he telling them to worship Ares as the New Testament God? That's the thing. So, as a fan points out in the chat, Greeks didn't really like Ares. That's right. That's my point. Paul, so-called Paul, went to Areopagus. And he's trying to tell them not to oppose Ares, worship Ares as the God of the Bible. I think the author of Luke Acts could have been aware of this. It would not surprise me. I do not think that Mars is a different god, although I do think that Mars is a different take on the same god. Mars is interesting. The Roman version of Ares. Mars Pater, father of the Roman people, as he's called. He had children called Romulus and Remus, so they're claimed to be his children anyway. And let me just come back to Anat for a minute before I finish that. What I was saying there about Romulus and Remus. You'll never find a passage condemning the goddess Anat anywhere in the Bible. I don't care about other characters using a name similar to Anat. That doesn't count. Find me a passage where Anat is condemned, not the idiocracy about names being so similar to her. No, it has to be specific to the deity. I don't want to hear about anything less. Anyway, back to sanity. Romulus. Let's talk about Romulus and Remus. Yeah, so Romulus kills Remus. The similarity is so obvious that others have compared that story to Cain and Abel in the past. As I've compared them to Cain and Abel in the past. It's very strange how similar the stories are to Cain and Abel. The reason for brother killing brother is a little different, a bit different, but it happens nonetheless in both stories. Yeah. The hour is almost up and we only planned for an hour. So we got about a little over 5 minutes to go. I remind everybody real quick that the link to Kumar's YouTube channel, Satya Vibes, is in the description below. But also, History Valley India is tagged there as well. So you want to go subscribe to it and keep an eye out for some videos in Hindi. But again, it's for people that know Hindi, and I doubt that much of the people over here listening to History Valley know that language, but and just to be clear, I don't know it. But it's that's going to be worked on by either Kumar or other people that are going to work on those videos for me. So just to be clear, but we still got a couple of minutes to talk.
Yeah. Jacob, can I ask you some questions? Just like,
Sure.
yeah. So it's just a lot of information. So you mentioned that there are certain similarities between Yahweh and some of the gods in Hinduism, like Indra, because we could trace some roots even back to the Mesopotamian religion, where there are some storm gods, and there is some literature out there. So that is quite interesting to me, because in the Bible we see that Yahweh is portrayed as the only God, and there are some psalms where he was prized as a storm god, the god who brings rain, a storm, and gives them crops. But you also mentioned that the storm god Baal has different variations. There are varieties of Baals in the Canaan region.
Well, it's a title for multiple different gods, not like it's different. It's not different versions of the same god. It's multiple different gods entirely.
Yes. So in the Bible, from the perspective of Israelites, it seems they have changed a little bit to portray Yahweh as the only God, and demonized, or maybe they kind of reduced the power of other gods like Baal. Is that the right way to think about it? Did the authors of the Bible, or the editors, did they change a little bit to fit their new version?
In a sense, but I want to carefully explain that they don't want to explicitly contradict the story. I mean, they don't want to contradict that Indra. That Yahweh is Ishkur, but they do want to make his identity vague. You see this in Exodus. When Moses asked him, "Who are you?" It's like he just responds, "Aya, Sir Aya, I am who I am." Not really an answer. And that's the problem. Is like the whole point in the Hebrew Bible, the whole concept of Yahweh. It's not really a name. It's not. It's not. It's in the way that we were to understand a name. It was created to obscure the identity of the Hebrew God. That's why I find it silly to try to go out and find mentions of Yahweh before the Hebrew Bible. I'm like, you'll get some deities that sound like it vaguely, but the thing is, it's not consistent. I'll give an example. Oh, Yah of Canaan is Yahweh. Well, he's a sea god. I mean, if we want to go with that nonsense, I could say that Yarek is Yahweh because it sounds like it, but he's not. That's ridiculous. Yarek is a moon god in Canaan. Yah, an Egyptian moon god. You see my point? I could keep going with this Yah stuff all day long. There are several gods that sound like Yahweh vaguely, but it's not him. These come from sheer desperate attempts to try to make Yahweh a unique deity, and I kind of find it hilarious among seculars to do that. I'm like, you're acting like apologists. You're not even believers. What are you doing? Hey, he's going out there and basically lying. Let me just. I was calling out for what it is. It's lying. Like I've been holding my tongue for years. So I'm like, no, I'm done. I'm done with this. This is just lying. These are just lies. Because if you start saying that Yahweh is actually based on the pagan deity, and get rid of the nonsense about Yah this and Yah that and Yah that endlessly, then that means Yahweh loses his pedestal as being the special, unique God. Gets tossed out the window. Of course,
so what yours?
Let me just say one more thing. Of course, after they give Yahweh the name Yahweh, it becomes a name, obviously, because somebody in the chat was talking about that this is strange because they even put Yahoo in their name. Yes. Of course, it becomes normalized later. Okay? I'm not denying that. It had to start, it had to begin at some point. I'm just trying to explain how it started. And there is definitely evidence that they already created the name Yahweh before the Hebrew Bible actually was written down. The evidence in the Elephantine papyri is evidence of that. That's proof of that. The Yahweh in its Ashura inscription is evidence of that. So the creation of the name Yahweh obviously precedes the Hebrew Bible. I'm not denying that. But it's not to me, I think they created that name to give this deity, the specific deity that I've been talking about all stream, a new identity. I'll give an analogy. It's not perfect. But I'll give an analogy. Let's say somebody commits crimes in a country. They're fleeing the police and decide to go to another country. And they go to another country and they change their identity. They change everything. They get a new birth certificate. Everything gets changed. And he doesn't want anybody. And he even gets plastic surgery on his face to change his looks. He wants to be a completely different person. Doesn't want anyone to remember who he was before. It's like reading Hosea. Don't call me Bali anymore. Call me Ishi. Yes, that's actually there in the Bible. Hosea 2:16, Hosea 2:18, and other Bibles. If you're reading a Tanakh, it's probably going to be Hosea 2:18. If you're reading a Christian Bible, it's Hosea 2:16. Oh, what you trying to hide, God? What you trying to hide? You don't want to be called Baal anymore, my master? Bali, my master? You want to be called Yishi, my husband? Interesting right there. But back to my analogy. Yeah. So the criminal goes to another country, changes his name, birth certificate, changes the looks of his face, gets plastic surgery to carry that out, to hide who he was. And he gets a new family, doesn't tell them who he was before. He just lies and makes up a story about his past. A fictional story that he created to obscure his true past. That's how I look at the God of the Bible. He's kind of like that in a way. The story is being changed. His identity is changed. What's that?
So, despite the fact that the name Yahweh might be unique, which is not found in other cultures and other religions, but definitely the features that he was presented in the Bible, or some of the attributes he adopted from the other cultures. I think it's very striking, right? Even in the Psalms, where they worship Yahweh as the one who brings rain, as the one who is like the master who rules over people. So all these illustrations and allusions point out the fact that the people who knew him or who were original to that context, they definitely grabbed something from other religions and they attributed it to Yahweh. Don't you think that is the case?
Well, I mean, that's kind of what I'm saying. I mean, they had to borrow the God from the God of the Bible from another religion. They had to do that. And they borrowed from other cultures. I just had mentioned earlier Greco-Roman influence on the Bible. So so yeah, I'm not opposed to that at all. I find it quite amazing how they kept track of the different forms of Ishkur, different cultures, because it's so consistent to his personality, his narratives, the characteristics of Ishkur. It's so consistent. I've been planning on this for a long time. I just haven't gotten around to it yet, but eventually, I'm not going to say when, because I don't want to say it's going to happen on this particular date and then we arrive to it and it doesn't come out. But at some point, an unspecified point in the future, I'm going to get a documentary published on the channel. I'm going to make a documentary in which I go over the evidence much more extensively with the text on the screen. And edited professionally, but I just haven't gone around to that yet. But yeah, I just want everybody to keep an eye out for that. And we're 7 minutes past closing, so I'm going to go ahead and get closing here. Again, just want to remind everybody that the link, the History Valley India is tagged in the description below, and the link to Satya Vibes is also in the description below. And they will, of course, be in the pinned comment. And with that being said, Kumar, thank you very much for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks, Jacob. Thanks for answering questions and discussing a lot of these things. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for coming on and also for offering your assistance. I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too.
Hello viewers, thanks for watching this video from the History Valley YouTube channel. Please don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. And if any of you wish to further support this channel, please consider checking out this channel's Patreon page and becoming a patron, and or donate through PayPal or through Super Chat during your live stream. Thank you.